And hello and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren Jaime. Today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough as well as across New York City. Coming up, we'll learn about a grant that's studying lung metastasis in breast cancer. Then, we'll talk about a shelter that's transforming the lives of domestic violence survivors and homeless families. Then, we'll meet a company helping people preserve their family heritage. We'll give you some more details a little bit later on in the show. We'll talk about a new resource that's designed to give Bronx residents the means to participate in the new legal cannabis industry. So stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. And hello everyone, I'm Daren Jaime, and you are watching Open, a live and interactive program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. We also want to welcome our viewers to Manhattan Neighborhood Network as we are being broadcast live simultaneously on the MNN channel. You can stay connected to us on all of our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. Well, some things have been going on throughout the course of the past week. We'll take you through it with our Bronx updates. And we start with city news. Menus across New York City would be adding sugar warnings. Now, the Sweet Truth Act is called to warn customers of chain restaurants if food and drink items exceed the daily recommended amount of added sugar, which is 50 grams. Now, the new warning bill does not ban sweet menu items. Instead, it will require chain restaurants defined as eateries with 15 or more locations in 5 boroughs to add a sugar warning icon to menu items exceeding 100% of the FDA's daily recommended amount of added sugar. In electric news, Con Edison is warning customers to expect higher prices for gas and electric services this winter. Now, the utility stated the average national gas heating customer using an average of 165 therms per month is expected to pay about $460 a month from November 2022 to March of 2023. Now, according to Con Ed, the increases are a result of increases in the market cost of natural gas, which also impacts electric prices. In other news, Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition held a rally and a community installation calling for community involvement in the city's renewed phase of redevelopment at the Kingsbridge Armory. Our BronxNet reporter, Sanji Lopez, was there. She has the details.
Who's Bronx? Who's Armory? Who's Armory?
For decades, the Kingsbridge Armory has been a fixture in the Kingsbridge Heights community, an empty relic with thousands of square feet of possibilities.
A significant portion of it should be used for commercial reasons.
I have this idea in my head for like Bronx Garment Factory.
In this space, we should have some type of cannabis incubation.
Other cultural events and commercial events. It could be put in use to generate revenue to benefit the community.
And now, after plans to build an ice rink fell through in 2021, the Armory is entering a renewed phase of redevelopment. The city is seeking new projects to bring to the Armory, and the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition and community members are asking for a seat at the table.
What goes in here is up to you, not up to the developers. It's up to you.
We young people have a lot to offer in this process. We also have a lot to gain and a lot to lose depending on what happens with the Armory.
Public land, like the Armory, it shouldn't be sold to the highest bidder, but it should benefit local residents, local vendors, local unions, and the people who live in this community.
We want to make sure that we have community input, we have community ownership, and that our vision is implemented on anything that happens in this space.
In the next 6 months are extremely crucial to the redevelopment to make sure that it's equitable and that it's something that benefits the Bronx and this community.
Amidst the redrawing of district lines, a community that spent decades to brainstorm ideas for the space is at risk of losing an opportunity to have a stake in the planning process. That's because the latest proposed map redesign by the Redistricting Commission removes the Kingsbridge Armory from District 14 and gives it to District 11, which is comprised of neighborhoods like Woodlawn and Riverdale. If the maps are finalized, those communities would have a stake instead.
We demand that they put it back into that district. Stop dividing our districts, all right? Like, that's not right. They divided this to the Kingsbridge district and divided it into two. Like, taking away the power of some of the decision-making power from the people here and giving it to Riverdale and these other neighborhoods. It's crazy. Not now. That's not right.
Today's rally also gave the local community an opportunity to share their vision for the future of Kingsbridge Armory. If you'd like to submit your ideas, you can email info@northwestbronx.org. Reporting for BronxNet, Sanji Lopez.
And thank you, Sanjay. Of course, we will keep you up to date with all the latest in regards to the Kingsbridge Armory. That about wraps up our Bronx updates. We will be back with more show when we return.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And welcome back. Breast cancer is a major public health problem in the United States and is associated with more than 40,000 deaths each year. The National Cancer Institute has awarded our next guest a $10 million team science grant to investigate the mechanisms regulating cancer cells seeding tumors in the lung. Joining us now to share more details is the professor and chair of molecular pharmacology at Albert Einstein College of Medicine and associate director for shared resources at Montefiore's Einstein Center, Dr. Jonathan Bacher. And Dr. Bacher, thank you so much for being with us.
Okay, pleased to be with you.
Thank you, and congratulations. I know the grant is a $10 million grant over the next 5 years. Walk us through a little bit about how this grant is actually going to play out and what we can expect.
Well, I think the major issue in solid tumors like breast cancer is that the tumor isn't usually what kills the patient. It is the metastasis. And that's what this grant is really designed to try to work on, to understand at a very basic level what are the mechanisms by which tumor cells can leave the tumor, migrate through the blood, exit the blood at another site and sort of set up shop. And metastatic disease is really important issue for cancer patients in the Bronx, particularly with breast cancer. The rates of cancer, of death from cancer, are 20% higher in the Bronx than they are in the rest of New York. And there's also particularly high rates in Black and Hispanic women. And the Montefiore Einstein Cancer Center, which is one of the fourth oldest in the country, this is actually our 50th year, under the direction of Dr. Ed Chu, has really made a major focus to try to improve cancer care and cancer treatment for the patients in the Bronx. And so ideally what this program will do will be to identify novel targets that could be used to develop novel drugs.
Give us a little bit about the research, because I understand you've got some innovative methods that you're going to be used to conduct this research.
Sure. Well, one of the key issues is that metastasis is a very dynamic process. As I've suggested, that tumor cells leave the tumor, go through the blood, arrive in the lung. It all happens very fast. And so understanding how those tumor cells are able to survive in this completely alien environment is complex. And so some of the technologies that have been developed in the Bruce Lipper Biophotonics Center at Einstein have been development of essentially windows that one can put into the chest wall of a mouse. They're sort of like a microscope slide, but implanted in the chest wall. And what that lets you do is to actually image tumor cells as they enter the lung from the blood vessels, as they cross from the blood vessel into the lung, as they subsequently decide to divide or to hold off on dividing. Some of them die. And you can start to really observe those processes in real time in a live mouse. So it really gives you an unprecedented degree of clarity, much better than just sort of, looking at histological slides at different times, because you can really study what's going on in real time.
What are the things that are really piquing your curiosity when it comes to this? In other words, talk to me about what are you hoping that you're going to be able to find, questions that you might have answered?
Well, again, the goal is, as for the entire cancer center, the goal is really to address cancer care and cancer treatment for our patient population in the Bronx. This is the preclinical grant. That means the studies we are doing are largely done in mice. But the whole idea of preclinical studies funded by the National Cancer Institute is that you can apply what you learn from an animal model and then subsequently move that into clinical trials or eventually into the clinic. And there have been notable examples of that kind of development at Einstein, for instance. There are novel clinical trials for both cell-based and small molecule-based treatments for breast cancer. And actually, some of the collaborators in our program project have developed, based on the kind of imaging studies that we're doing here, novel diagnostic procedures for trying to evaluate a patient to see who's at high risk for developing metastatic disease, as well as novel approaches to actually treating metastasis. So that's really the goal, that the understanding of the basics of the process can lead to developing new therapeutics or new diagnostics.
Montefiore Cancer Center has been doing great work here in our community, really dealing with this issue and then some. Talk to us and share with a little bit about with our viewers about the work that goes on at Montefiore Cancer Center.
I'm sorry, repeat the last part of the question?
Sure, I said share with us a little bit about the work that goes on at Montefiore Cancer Center.
Well, again, we don't just do breast cancer. I mean, there are investigators who are interested in a wide range of different cancer types, and it ranges from very basic studies, understanding how cancer cells work and how they're able to grow and how they're able to travel from one organ to another, to more clinical studies trying to determine both novel therapeutics as well as new combinations of therapeutics that might be important for cancer. And there's also a lot of emphasis in the Cancer Center on prevention and outreach to the community in terms of screening and prevention. I mean, for instance, this is a flyer from an upcoming, I guess you can't see that, sorry, I won't do this again. From October 8th, there's a free screening event that Montefiore is sponsoring for women in the community screening for breast cancer, and well as there's a lot of outreach in terms of approaches to behavior modification to try to limit risk factors for different kinds of cancers. So I think really the Cancer Center is trying to cover the whole gamut, from basic research for mechanisms, new therapeutics, outreach to deal with risk factors and screening, and eventually new therapies for cancer patients.
Yeah. And once again, I want you to give me a little bit of a highlight as to when we talk about African-American women, when it comes to breast cancer, those numbers are a little bit larger than normal?
Yeah, both African-American women and Hispanic women have higher rates of mortality and higher rates of metastasis in breast cancer. And innovative work done at Einstein, for instance, has shown that it's early days, and they're still trying to really establish how widespread that there is. But there are some suggestions that in African-American women that standard chemotherapy might actually have different effects on the ability of the tumor cells to metastasize than they would in other populations. So if one can identify, differences in different populations in terms of how they respond to therapeutics, that's really important work to do.
Yeah. So this grant is over the course of 5 years, and I want to talk about that first year. We understand the first year. Give us a little bit more about what we can see in possibly years 2 and 3.
Well, it's hard to break up a 5-year grant like that, right? I mean, the studies take a long time. We have to develop reagents, in some cases, in animal models. So I think, what we hope to see is that, we have initial hypotheses as to the role of certain intracellular proteins in the tumor cells and how they affect the ability of those tumor cells to metastasize. We make models where we manipulate the tumor cells to increase or decrease the expression of those proteins. We sort of see what happens, and then based on those results, we can then, further elaborate the experiments to work further downstream. But it's a little hard in a very basic science grant to give you, concrete milestones of what's happening in year 2 versus year 3.
Yeah. And your initial reaction to receiving the grant?
I'm sorry?
Your initial reaction to receiving the grant?
Was to be delighted and to be excited, because these grants take a lot of people. This grant was 5 years in the making. We started working groups 5 years ago to try to identify investigators who shared common interests and shared common ideas about how to study breast cancer metastasis. And the key to an NCI program project, which is the kind of grant this is that it can't just be a collection of individual projects. The individual projects have to really work together in a way so that the outcome is greater than the sum of the parts. And finding the right investigators that you can do that with takes some time. As I say, we've been working on this for 5 years, and we just got the funding last July. And I think, as one of the PIs on the project said, now the fun part starts. So
Yeah.
now we really get to dive into these studies and see what we can learn. So eventually we can help people.
Dr. Jonathan Backer, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, congratulations. We're looking forward to seeing the work that's being done in the area of breast cancer that affects so many people. Thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
All righty. Now, if you want more information, you can visit the website at einsteinmed.edu, and then also follow them on Twitter and Instagram at EinsteinMed. We encourage you to don't go anywhere. We've got more open coming up. We'll return right after this. Welcome back. Urban Resource Institute is an organization that's committed to a world free of domestic violence, homelessness, poverty, and trauma, where communities are safe, stable, and thriving. We talked to the Senior Vice President of Domestic Violence Residential and Legal Programs at Urban Resource Institute, Jennifer White-Reid, about our URI PALS program and their pet-friendly domestic violence shelter. Let's take a look.
Thank you for having me, Daren.
I gave a little bit of an intro as to your organization, but you can do a little better job. So tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Absolutely. I'm privileged to be part of the Urban Resource Institute. We have been around providing services in the community for a little over 40 years. And as you noted, we specialize in working with the community that impacted by victims of domestic violence and impacted by homelessness. You know, we really create programs that look at barriers to seeking safety, and really look at ways to help folks improve their lives. We are the largest provider of domestic violence shelter services in the country. We operate 14 domestic violence shelters, and on any given night, we can support 1,500 adults and children with their pets.
And when we talk about supporting children with pets, domestic violence is huge. And I know that having pets as a part of domestic violence is something that you work with. Can you give us a little bit of a correlation between the two?
Absolutely. I would say in about 2013, a little less than 10 years ago, we launched our People and Animals Living Safely program, PALS. At that time, we started to see the research that up to 50% of victims of domestic violence who were pet owners would not leave a dangerous situation because they could not take their pet with them. And at that time, very few domestic violence shelters allowed families to come in with their pets. So we created an innovative model that really thought about the entire family. This is a program that is trauma-informed, client-centered. We recognize that about 67% of American households have at least one pet. Pets are part of the family. They are our confidants. They are our supporters. They are our comforters during times of stress. And you can only imagine that when someone is experiencing domestic violence and they're thinking about leaving, that they don't want to leave anyone behind, and that includes their beloved pet. So we started our PALS program, and at this point, we now have 9 shelters out of our 14 sites that are pet friendly.
Amazing. And what difference have you noticed in having a pet-friendly shelter?
Absolutely. We have recognized that it has opened the doors and reduced that barrier. So victims of domestic violence who may not have wanted to leave a dangerous situation because they did not think they could take their pet, they could now take their pet. We noticed that when families are together, they are healing and thriving and building a new life together with their pet. They are exercising together. They are really looking at their health together. We have a partnership with local vets and the ASPCA to make sure that not only the adults get medical care, but the pets get medical care. We also recognize that our clients appreciate that we see their pets as important. It really validates what's important to them. And so we like to build programs around individualized services, sort of what is meaningful to you. And we hope that, other programs and other agencies across the city, state, and the nation will replicate our model.
So before this, right, you've implemented this program. Before this, how were you managing and what were you noticing as some of the barriers or challenges?
Yeah, and sometimes it's an adult who has a pet and sometimes it's a child. So we heard stories from our childcare staff that our kids were mourning the loss of a pet. There's also statistics that show that abusive partners use pets to threaten and manipulate victims of domestic violence. So we've heard graphic stories of, a perpetrator threatening to put a cat in a microwave and turn the microwave on if the victim didn't come home at a certain time. We have heard stories of pets not being fed, pets being placed in the closet, physically abused. And so these are serious, really serious situations that make victims of domestic violence think, I can't leave, I can't leave without my pet. And so certainly being able to open the doors to the entire family increases safety for everybody.
When we look at where we are right now, I mean, obviously this new center is here and it's obviously an advantage to a lot of people. Talk to us about what you're hearing now that you have this opportunity to have a pet-friendly place for victims of domestic violence. Are the residents excited, or how do they feel? Do they notice, I should say, even the shift?
So for your views, we are just delighted that we opened our new domestic violence shelter that is pet friendly in Queens. It is the very first pet friendly domestic violence shelter in Queens. And our clients have expressed such gratefulness to be able to come to this site with their pets. We have partnered with Banfield Foundation, which is so incredibly important because this partnership demonstrates that our clients' connections to their pets is important, that it's meaningful, that there's value there. It is a life-saving program. So Banfield Foundation has generously provided financial support to help us build a pet park in our backyard. It will create a engaging space for our kids and adults and pets to be able to exercise together. There will be a beautiful, colorful mural that is soothing and comforting. There will be agility equipment and supplies, and just really a wonderful recreation space for the families to be together.
And you did mention the Banfield Foundation really helping you for an outdoor park. And talk to us about what that really means to have them as a partner in making that happen.
Like I said, you can when you connect with the private sector and they recognize the importance of this work, the importance of having a deep impact in the lives of domestic violence victims, it's incredible. And so this highlights the value of relationships, that human-animal bond. You certainly think about catastrophes that you've seen on television where there's Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Katrina, where you see people holding on to their animals. And so this partnership is invaluable because we know that we'll be able to continue to do this work and help our clients really rebuild their lives and thrive and be healthy and address some of the trauma that they've experienced from being in abusive situations.
And having a residential program obviously is a great blessing to a lot of people who are really dealing with domestic violence. I know that we talked about pets and how it plays a role, but can you give us an idea a little bit? Because I think you talked about it just a little while ago, that sometimes when you have these victims who are experiencing domestic violence in such a tragic way, really getting them to safety requires the bringing along of a pet. And if a pet can't come, and I'll give you an example just for fire purposes. I remember, a fire, and some people would not want to be rescued or go through the full necessary things for a rescue because they didn't want to leave their pets behind.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when it comes to domestic violence, I know that also can sometimes be the case.
We've had some survivors share that they have lived in their cars. They have gone couch to couch with their cat or their dog in unsafe situations because there were no shelters that allowed the pet to come in. So nationally, the statistics are about 3% to 5% of domestic violence shelters have some type of co-sheltering program where the pet is included. Sometimes it's a program where the pet is located in a kennel attached to the shelter, could be outside, could be in the basement. And other programs are similar to ours, which is the co-living model, where families get to live together with their pet, right? So that they can see each other every single day, they can nurture each other every single day. But absolutely, pets are part of the family. Sometimes they intervene and they protect victims of domestic violence during incidents. And Americans in particular tend to have pets. And, we saw an increase in pet ownership over the last couple of years due to the pandemic. So certainly we know that the domestic violence numbers are staggering. Every year, the New York City Domestic Violence Hotline answers anywhere between 100,000 to 110,000 phone calls from victims of domestic violence. So you have a significant number of survivors and then significant number of pet owners. So that if there isn't a safe place for them to go as a family, adults, children, and pets, someone may stay in an unsafe situation.
So give me a little walkthrough here when we talk about domestic violence. We know that a lot of the numbers are staggering, the numbers continue to rise. What are you seeing in terms of since COVID? Because since COVID, a lot of people had to domesticate and be around people that sometimes they necessarily didn't want to be around. Work was an escape, school was an escape, all of that, but no longer when COVID hit. What were you seeing? Were you seeing an increase in numbers?
We absolutely saw a spike in domestic violence as a result of the pandemic, right? So people were not going to the office, so they were staying home and in close quarters. There were individuals who, may have in the past gotten on the phone to call a hotline. At this point, you couldn't because there weren't those private spaces to be able to seek help. We've heard stories of people who, waited all day for the perpetrator to leave, to go to the corner store, to sort of negotiate and figure out how she could leave the environment. We also had survivors who did not know what it was like to be in shelter. It is often a mystery to come into shelter. And there's a misconception that domestic violence shelters are, spaces with large rooms and cots. It's not like that. We definitely at Urban Resource Institute develop programs that are apartment buildings where our families have their own apartment. They have kitchen facilities, private bathroom facilities. We offer supplies recognizing that survivors will flee and leave most of their personal belongings behind. And so we always have a welcome kit for both the humans and the pets. And so we saw a significant spike in phone calls across the city, but we also had to engage in a couple of awareness campaigns because we wanted people to recognize that despite the pandemic, our doors were still open. Where a lot of folks were really scared and didn't know what to do, and maybe majority of staff were working from home. In our community, our work, we're all frontline workers. Our domestic violence shelters were always open. Our staff came to work every single day. We had day shifts and evening shifts and overnight shifts. So we went out of our way to make sure that, including conversations with media, about making sure that people knew that our doors are open, and they remain open.
And for you right now, obviously, the doors being open is a great thing because now you have people who have the opportunity to say, listen, if I'm in trouble, I can get out, I can get to you. And that's a great thing. But on the other side, there's so many others that don't make it out, right? What encouragement can you give to people about, because shelters come with a stigmatism sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
What encouragement would you give to people, or advice would you give to people when it comes to even thinking about this? Because sometimes the biggest stop is, I don't want to live in that shelter, but there's so much more to a shelter than I think people imagine.
Absolutely. And the most important thing is for everyone to understand that it's a personal decision for someone to make. We don't tell people that they have to leave. They have to really think about what's best for them. Sometimes getting an order of protection only makes the situation more difficult. So it's an individualized assessment. And so for those who are ready and able to leave an environment, we like to talk about building a safety plan. So whether you're building a plan to leave in 30 days or 60 days, think about your environment. Think about, if you have access to a little bit of cash, where can you save those things? Where can you put your keys and your personal documentation, your social security card, copies of your birth certificates, if you have children, copies of your children's documentation, your passport? How can you plan if ultimately you know that this relationship is not a safe one and that you ultimately want to transition, but you're not sure how and when? What we'd love for you to think about, and you can talk to case managers, you can talk to hotline workers, is building that safety plan that you and you alone will execute when you are ready.
Yeah. Jennifer, before we leave, I want you to give an opportunity. I want to give you an opportunity to tell people how they can get in touch if they're really interested or they know somebody that needs this assistance.
So to your audience, if you are a victim of domestic violence or you know someone, you can reach out to Urban Resource Institute, URI, by reaching out to our website, which is urinyc.org. We have a host of information, materials that you can read through, including safety planning materials. You can also contact the New York City Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-621-HOPE. To be assessed for safety and to be placed in a shelter, including a domestic violence shelter that would accommodate the needs of your entire family, including a pet.
Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us, and certainly thank you for the work that you're doing to helping families and victims who really need this much needed assistance. Thank you so much.
And thank you again for including me in this really important conversation.
Definitely important conversation. Thanks much.
All right, take care.
And don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more Open right after this. And welcome back. Treemily is a company that's focused on creating family trees where customers can design, build, and order trees matching their family's heritage. Now, Treemily aspires to help others explore their ancestry and enjoy genealogy by providing them with an online tool to effortlessly create beautiful family trees. Joining me now and sharing more details is the product manager at Treemily, Moish Soloway. And Moish, thank you so much for being with us. And when we talk about connecting families together and the ancestry piece, it's become more and more prevalent amongst our society where people are looking to know more about who they are and where they come from.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's great to talk about Treemily. We spent years putting it together, and finally, it's out there. Um, One of the things I really love about Treemily is not being a someone that's obsessed with genealogy. There's only that much I can take doing real research. And what I love about Treemly is the fact that it makes genealogy accessible for people like me, because all it takes is literally a couple of names. You throw in the names, you throw in some photos, and boom, you get a beautiful visualization of a family tree. So it just makes the whole thing so much more pragmatic. Because ultimately, I think a lot more people are there's so many people not focusing in genealogy because it's just associated with a ton of research.
Yeah. So take us through, right? So you've got family trees and you've got what's called the family tree builder. So explain to us what the family tree builder is and what it does.
I think the easiest way to do it is to take you through a history of the company itself. The founder, Asher Halberstam, is somebody who lives in Brooklyn. His father is a Holocaust survivor, and I believe he was a teenager during the Holocaust and then came across to the United States. And as someone that lost the entire family in the war, he really committed himself to genealogy. Now, Asher is someone that was always into arts, and he was doing calligraphy and drawing. And ever since he was a kid, his father told him, "Listen, my focus in life is genealogy. Can you draw me some beautiful family trees?" And that's what he has been doing. So a couple of years ago, he decided that using modern technology, he can actually take that skill, something that he used to do manually for his father, and bring it to all of us. So basically, the way Treemily works and the way the tree builder works is people can put in the information that they desire. So let's say if I'm building a tree for my father, so I'll put in his name, mom's name, his parents, her parents, myself, my brother, our families, our kids. And then I can select one of the designs Treemily offers. And we actually have a great pipeline. I think once a month we'll be putting out new designs. Press a button, booms, I have a whole thing generated for me. I can make adjustments, I can edit names, I can edit pictures, and then you select what you want. You can order a canvas, you can order a print, you can get it framed and have it shipped to you.
So when you talk about the family tree, that requires research. We talked about that a second ago. Some people don't like doing the
Right.
research, right? But, you know, it is becoming more of, you know, a family hobby, more of the fact that people can now just use this and engage this. Talk to me about this. What do you talk about, you know, using this as a, you know, using this research as a hobby? Because, yeah, the trees are growing and the people are wanting more and more information about where they actually came from.
Exactly, and it's such a great way to make gifts meaningful as opposed to, you know, looking for another useless item to buy. You can just create something really personal and have conversations around it. I mean, how do people find out stories about their families? You start talking about, you know, this grandparent, that grandparent, and then you find out things you never heard. So this is definitely a great conversation starter. And when we're talking about genealogy, it doesn't mean going to libraries and digging all the way back. It can all start with taking the oldest family member and asking him or her about what life was like back then. What kind of experiences did their family go through? In reality, it's our family, and then you learn so much about it, about yourself, about, you know, something to pass on to your kids.
Yeah, I was looking at this note. It really stuck out to me. It said global genealogy products and services market was valued about $3 billion in 2019, and it's estimated to reach $8 billion by 2026. So that lets you know that more and more people are actually participating, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know, it might have to do with age. You know, you know, the older you get, the more you start to focus on those things. But but I also think, I mean, think about the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic really it made a lot of us, you know, start thinking about bigger things in life than just everyday, you know, survival. And knowing who you are is really a quintessential question that's answered through genealogy.
Yeah. Well, Moish, thank you so much for joining us and being here. And I think that anybody who wants to know a little bit more about the family can definitely get connected to you. And as we said, the numbers are just, you know, amazing to look at how by 2026 expected to reach 8 billion. So thanks much.
Thank you, Daren. Take care.
All righty. Want to let you know now, if you want more information, you can visit the website at treemily.com. Follow them also on Instagram and Twitter at Treemily Family. And we don't want you to go anywhere because Open is coming back with more show right after this. And welcome back. The Bronx Cannabis Hub aims to ensure the social equity provisions of New York's cannabis law are realized by providing information and opportunities as well as support to the communities most harmed by the cannabis prohibition. Joining me now to share more details, we've got the co-founder of the Bronx Community Foundation, Desmon Lewis. And Desmond, glad to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you and great to talk to you. And I want to talk about this because when we talk about cannabis, we know that, marijuana, arrests, right? These are the words that are synonymous. And then what's even more synonymous are communities of color. Walk me through, share with me a little bit about, the disparities that's actually been had on families, particularly when it comes to this area.
And thank you again for covering this important topic. So when you look at the history of marijuana, particularly in communities disproportionately impacted in the Bronx, we would argue is the community that was probably the most disproportionately impacted in the state. Numbers-wise, if you look at arrests across New York City and look at the districts, the top 10 districts on arrests, 4 of the top 10 districts for arrests in the Bronx for marijuana are actually in the Bronx. And so there's no better place to be doing the work that we're doing in our community. And then when you look at those individuals who've been directly impacted, formerly incarcerated, those who've been convicted of a marijuana offense, they've had a tremendous amount of impact personally and professionally over many, many years. Inability to get jobs, inability to get loans, inability to support their family, inability just to have opportunity, right, afforded to many other people in the Bronx. And so, with the Bronx Cannabis Hub launching and the new MRTA regulation sort of expunging a lot of the cannabis records that have really been disproportionately impacted in our community, this is a huge opportunity for Bronxites and disproportionate communities across the city to really take advantage of a situation where they themselves have been personally impacted. And so we are very excited to be supporting some of these activities and getting Bronxites really their just deserve in the cannabis space.
Yeah, share with me a little bit. We're talking about the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, but share with us, how do you think this will really have a benefit locally with our communities?
So New York State's doing something very different than most states in the country, and we're pretty proud of it. Is that firstly, they're prioritizing justice-impacted individuals. So the first 150 to 175 licenses are going to be for those individuals who have been impacted by a marijuana offense. There are some other regulation requirements, such as having a profitable business, and also making sure that you do have that marijuana conviction itself. And so Bronxites, particularly given the amount of arrests that have happened in our community, really are in a prime position to take advantage of this opportunity to be an entrepreneur in this industry, to be able to launch the conditional adult use retail dispensary, or the CARD license, is the first license that's going to be issued in New York State. And because of the fact of the sheer number of arrests in the Bronx, we believe that the Bronx is really the place that should be put to the forefront to take advantage of some of these opportunities. And so we're excited about this particular license, but we're also excited about all the other license types that are going to come out and be driven by OCM over the next couple of years.
So I know one of the things that you have going on at the Hub is educational services. Yes. What kind of educational services do you have for the public when it comes to this?
So we're designing sort of a multi-pronged educational series. And I think the most important part is that we're going to be working with grassroots organizations who've been on the ground doing this work for many, many years, organizations like Mothers on the Move, One Freedom, Take Root, and many others, to really design this educational programming. And it's going to be multifaceted. It's going to be in entrepreneurship, or let's say workforce development stroke entrepreneurship. So how do we get jobs into the Bronx? How do we train people on getting jobs in the industry? There's going to be a health aspect. We know that marijuana is just a plant, contrary to what our public sector colleagues would like to classify it. And so there's some medicinal, benefits. But there's also, people need to be aware, fundamentally of what, the potential negative aspects of it are, right? And so we're going to be doing some education around health. And then we're also going to be doing some advocacy work, right? Education on how people can get involved in the community to make sure that some of the wrongs that were created in the past around this industry are not, do not happen again, that, our communities that are disproportionately impacted are prioritized. There's a lot of funding coming from the state. And so we want to educate our community on what those opportunities are to bring generational wealth building into the Bronx.
And before we go, Desmon, I want to throw in about community-based organizations, because you're also working with them too. They're bringing things and you're bringing things to them. There's a good collaboration there. Can you give us a little idea of some of the organizations that you're working with and the things that are happening?
Sure. So I think, because the Bronx is such a dynamic and innovative and grassroots place, there are a lot of organizations that are jumping in to help. So I named some of them, like Mothers on the Move, Take Root. There's a whole organization, coalition forming around bringing educational series to the Bronx. We're working with also schools like Lehman and some of the CUNY schools who are building curriculum around cannabis education. We're working with cultivators in the Bronx. Recently, the OCM has passed regulation that says you can do home grow. And so we're working with cultivators who are doing that in the Bronx to educate people on what that means. And so it has to always, one of the core foundation missions of the Community Foundation is to work with grassroots organizations who've been in the community alongside us for many years. And so that's how we're going to start this educational series. And that's really how we're going to fundamentally sustain this work in the Bronx.
Well, Desmon, I got to leave it there. I want to thank you for joining us and sharing. And certainly we got more to talk about when it comes to this, but glad to have you here talking about the Cannabis Hub and then also the work that's going on. Desmon Lewis, who's the co-founder of the Bronx Community Foundation. Thank you so much for being with us, brother.
Thank you for always bringing important topics to this audience.
All righty. Well, we got to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more right here on Open. And we're back continuing our conversation on the Bronx Cannabis Hub. We've got the Policy Counsel of the Criminal Defense Practice of the Bronx Defenders, Eli Northrup, joining us. And thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Well, I want to continue the conversation, talking a little bit about where myself and Desmond were wrapping up, talking about how organizations are really coming together to really, become more aware. And I think one of the things that we talk about when it comes to awareness is that there is a disparity, and the disparity between those who are using and those who are arrested. And I just want to get your take on that because I know that's something that you're trying to tackle as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Office of Cannabis Management has really emphasized individuals that have been arrested, and that's why we're trying to help those individuals through this process to apply for these licenses. But as much information as there is, and there is some information out there about these licenses, there's a lot of confusion as well. People see that there's storefronts, people see people selling, and none of those are actually licensed storefronts. And so people feel like they're behind the eight ball in terms of getting in on the industry. And we're trying to make sure that people know, look, this is the first round of applications, and you still have ability to participate in this economy.
So we hear a lot about the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, and we want to talk about what exactly is that. For somebody who doesn't know, give us a little insight.
Yeah, well, that's the bill that legalized adult use cannabis in New York. It went into effect on March 31st of last year. If you're over the age of 21, you can possess up to 3 ounces of cannabis inside or outside of your home. Eventually, you'll be able to possess up to 5 pounds inside of your home. Not only did that bill legalize adult use and set up a regulated market, it also looked to repair past harm done from decades of racist policing in cannabis. So it provided for expungement, automatic expungement of past convictions. 40% of the tax revenue from cannabis sales will go back into communities that were disproportionately impacted by cannabis policing, and social equity in licensing. And that's where the Bronx Cannabis Hub is really working right now to ensure that those social equity provisions actually play out as intended, and that people who were targeted for policing, people that suffered from cannabis prohibition, have a chance to actually make money and build generational wealth.
Well, late August, there was the application period that opened up. We're just about a month in. It's a 30-day application period. Can you tell us where we are and what you've been seeing as far as the application process?
Absolutely. I mean, so when we're airing right now, the application period is already closed. It closed on Monday, the 26th. We at the Bronx Cannabis Hub had a cohort of 40 people that we helped through the process. All of these individuals had to both have a cannabis-related conviction and 2 years of profitable business experience. So it was a pretty narrow range of people that were actually eligible for this first round of licenses. Now, obviously, there's going to be many more opportunities for licensing in the future, but this first round had those very specific criteria. We screened over 450 people. And so most people who were interested were not eligible for this round. But we've told them, social equity is a priority in every single round. So in the future, next year when the other application periods open, there'll be more opportunities for participation.
What are we doing to make sure about social equity? We hear so many people that are really concerned about this particular issue, saying that, listen, when it comes to those who had to do the time for doing it, they looked at like communities of color. When it looks like those who have the opportunity for now owning it and owning it legally, now they look white. Question needs to be answered. How's social equity?
Right. I mean, no state has really successfully done social equity in cannabis. You're right. If you look at other states, if you look at states like California, it's big corporations that come in after communities of color has suffered for years from prohibition. You've got big corporations coming in and making the money. And New York wanted to do it differently. The MRTA, the bill, attempts to do that. It's actually a really good bill for social equity. It ensures that there's not something called vertical integration. So in other states, big companies can own everything from seed to sale, which makes it a lot more profitable for them. In New York, companies can't do that. You can only really hold one type of license. So you could be a cultivator, you could be a processor, you could do delivery, you could have a dispensary, but you can't hold all of these things. That's an effort to prevent big business from coming in and taking over. And then on top of that, the Office of Cannabis Management, the agency that's in charge of carrying out these rules, is saying that they want to emphasize social equity at every single turn. So this is the first effort at social equity, right? This first round of licenses, you have to have a cannabis conviction to even be eligible. But in the future rounds of licenses, they are saying that social equity will be prioritized. And in fact, the bill requires that 50% of licenses go to social equity applicants in every single kind of license.
It's going to be pretty interesting to find out, and we'll continue to find out. I mean, 30 days just ended. Of course, we'll find out how things pan out. But if somebody wants to get more information, what do they do?
Yes, visit thebronxcannabishub.org. We'll be here to help individuals, especially justice-impacted people, especially Bronxites, through all the rounds of licenses. We'll have educational events, information, pro bono legal services. It's thebronxcannabishub.org, or you can find us at Instagram, Bronx Cannabis Hub.
All right. Eli, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for being with us here on the show and giving us the information that we need. Again, if you want to find out more information, we encourage you to go ahead and find out. You can do that, again, bronxcannabishub.org, and then also follow them on Instagram at Bronx Cannabis Hub. Well, we've come to the end of our show today. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us, and most of all, you, the viewer, for tuning in. Now, if you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recablecast on Optimum's Channel 67, Verizon Files, that's Channel 2133, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. Now, if you want a brand new episode, come back on Friday. My girl, Rena Valentine. She'll give you the best of arts and entertainment. This wraps up this episode of Open. I'm Daren Jaime saying thank you, take care, God bless, and most of all, keep this channel wide open. And a special shout out to those who've been watching on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, as Open is being broadcast live simultaneously on the Everyday channel. We'll see you later. Take care. God bless.